Hello friends, welcome aboard the Sleepy Fairy Tale Express. I'm the Red Mermaid. This train is a dream journey to fairy tale land. Have you all got your train tickets? Subscribe and hit the like button to always be able to ride. Close your eyes, prick up your ears, and listen in a comfortable position. Today's story is The Two Travelers. Just like hills and valleys do not meet each other, people meet each other by chance as part of nature. Under the blue sky, there were two travelers walking on a road. One was a shoemaker who made shoes, and the other was a tailor who sewed clothes. These two were walking toward different destinations, but they met by chance on the same road. The tailor was always a small man filled with laughter and love for joy. His face was always radiant with a smile that never left him. Even the smallest pebbles on the road seemed to shake in joy and play a merry melody with his every step. While walking, he met the shoemaker who was making shoes roughly and walking alone with a stern expression. On a sunny road, the tailor saw the shoemaker coming from the opposite direction. The heavy bag of the shoemaker spoke of his profession. It was filled with various tools and materials for making shoes, including leather, thread, nails, and everything needed for shoes made with tar. Seeing the shoemaker like this, the tailor smiled mischievously and spontaneously began to sing. His voice was lively and rhythmic. The song cleverly described the work of the shoemaker. Sew the seams, pull the thread, cover with tar, hammer the nails. This song, while revealing the tailor's joyful nature, also made their first meeting even more special. The tailor's song brought a small laugh to everyone on the road, and its lively melody spread far with the wind. Initially surprised, the shoemaker soon started to move his steps in tune with the playful song after seeing the tailor's clear laughter. Under the sunlight, the tailor's cheerful song spread far, but the shoemaker's heart was not at ease. A look of displeasure was clear on his face. Although the song was amusing, the shoemaker did not appreciate such jokes. His face scrunched as if he had drunk vinegar, and his eyebrows hardened with discomfort. He approached the tailor, making a gesture as if to jokingly grab his neck. This gesture was half in jest, but also sprang from genuine irritation. Amidst the tension, the tailor still did not lose his smile. He noticed the shoemaker's discomfort and pulled out his small leather bottle, offering the shining flask of liquor to the shoemaker, saying warmly, "I meant no harm, have a drink and let's calm the anger." Hesitant at first, the shoemaker took the bottle. As he grasped the flask, it seemed he made up his mind, sighed deeply, and brought the flask to his lips. He took a big gulp. As the liquor flowed down his throat, the tension on his face began to ease. After drinking, a smile slowly spread across the shoemaker's face, and the clouds in his eyes seemed to dissipate. The tailor's warm gesture and that single gulp seemed enough to melt the ice in his heart. The tension between them gradually eased, and they began to share a growing understanding and friendship. After a drink of reconciliation, the shoemaker returned the liquor bottle to the tailor with a smile and spoke in a slightly joking tone. "I really drank a lot. They say too much drinking leads to such incidents. Shall we travel together?" The tailor responded cheerfully to the proposal. "Sure," he answered, adding, "if it's okay to head to a big city where there's plenty of work." The shoemaker immediately nodded. "That's exactly where I want to go. There's not much earning in small towns, and in the countryside, people prefer to walk barefoot." Thus, the two set out on a journey together, each with their own purpose, but heading in the same direction. Their steps seemed lighter, as if they had shed the weight of their hearts. They stepped through the snow-covered path like stoats, carefully placing one foot after the other. Upon arriving in a new village, the tailor and the shoemaker had plenty of time during their journey, but their food was getting scarce. They walked into the heart of the village, greeting the local merchants they met. The villagers welcomed the new faces. The tailor, with his bright smile and rosy cheeks, won the hearts of the people. His cheerful personality and approachable demeanor easily earned him job offers from the locals. The tailor greeted everyone kindly, looking for opportunities to showcase his skills. His tailoring skills quickly became the talk of the town among the villagers. On his lucky days, sometimes the daughters of the house owners would sneak down to the front porch and give him a peck on the cheek. These small acts of kindness brought great joy to the tailor, and he became even happier with his life in the village. Thus, he maintained his positive attitude and passion for work, gaining recognition for his craftsmanship from the villagers. After finishing his work in the village, when the shoemaker and tailor met again, they had different experiences. The tailor had filled his bundle with repaired and newly made clothes. On the other hand, the quick-tempered shoemaker could not hide his discomfort at seeing this. His face was scrunched up, and he thought bitterly, "The badder they are, the luckier they seem." But the tailor, noticing the shoemaker's mood, continued to smile brightly and sang. He wanted to share everything he had earned with his colleague, the shoemaker. Whenever he found a few coins in his pocket, he happily headed to the pub for a drink. Drinking and being merry, the tailor would bang on the table, making the glasses dance. His actions spread joy to those around him, and he always said, "Easy come, easy go." Continuing their journey, the tailor and shoemaker finally arrived at the entrance to a large forest. This forest was a key route leading to the capital. There were two paths through the forest, one a long path taking 7 days, and the other a short path that could be done in just 2 days. However, they did not know which was the shorter path. Standing under the shadow of the great forest, the tailor looked around, contemplating this dilemma. The forest was dense, with trees soaring towards the sky, and the sunlight barely seeped through the gaps. The path seemed filled with adventure and secrets, and deciding which to choose was not an easy task. Deep in the forest under an oak tree, the tailor and shoemaker sat discussing their long journey ahead. Whichever path they chose, they needed to prepare food for the journey. Predicting how much food they would need was a crucial issue. The shoemaker chose a practical approach. Considering the uncertainty, he opted for safety. "We need to see before we run. I'll take bread for a week." His voice was cautious. This preparation was to hedge against the journey turning out to be more arduous or longer than expected. In contrast, the tailor looked at the situation more optimistically, though he respected the shoemaker's prudent approach. He acknowledged the shoemaker's planning while pondering what preparations he should make. The two planned their journey under the oak tree, meticulously checking and preparing the necessary supplies. After the shoemaker decided to prepare a week's worth of bread, the tailor expressed his thoughts and offered a different opinion. His voice was full of confidence. "What? Carrying bread for 7 days on your back like a beast, unable to look around? I will rely on God. I will not worry at all." He also pointed out practical issues. "The money in my pocket can be used just the same in summer and winter. But in hot weather, bread dries up and gets moldy. Even my coat won't last long." His words showed his confidence in the path he had chosen. Besides, why wouldn't we find the right path? 2 days' worth of bread will be enough. His optimistic and practical approach emphasized the minimal preparations needed to cross the forest. Thus, the two men finished their preparations in their own ways, with the shoemaker buying bread for a week and the tailor for 2 days. As the tailor and shoemaker entered the forest, the atmosphere was deep and quiet. The forest was as solemn and quiet as an old church. There was no wind, and even the small stream quietly flowed, making only their footsteps echo distinctly. Even the birds around seemed to have stopped singing, and no other signs of life could be heard. The forest was completely covered with thick leaves. Not even a single ray of sunlight could penetrate. In this silence, the shoemaker was especially quiet. He suffered from the weight of the bread he was carrying. The heavy burden on his back slowed his steps, and sweat ran down his hardened face. The sweat was a sign of discomfort and burden, showing how difficult his heavy decision actually was. Meanwhile, the tailor, in contrast to the shoemaker, appeared more comfortable due to carrying a lighter load. Even in the deep silence of the forest, the tailor did not lose his joy. His steps were light, and his heart was filled with happiness. He ran across the forest, seeing the sunlight filtering through the leaves, and whistled. Additionally, his voice echoed through the forest as he sang. His song would have sounded harmonious to the birds in the forest as well. The tailor felt that his happiness was transmitting positive energy to all the living things around him. He hoped that his joy reached the heavens, thinking, "The God in heaven will be happy to see me so joyful." These positive thoughts gave him even more strength and lightened his soul as he crossed the forest. Seeing the forest continue endlessly, the tailor realized that his decision to bring only 2 days' worth of bread might have been rash. By the 3rd day, his bread had already run out. The forest was still dark and deep, and no one could tell where it ended. Hunger weakened his body, and he lay down under a large tree, exhausted. It was a night full of fatigue and hunger, but a spark of hope still remained in his heart. The evening deepened, and the tailor suffered from hunger as he fell asleep. The next morning, his situation remained unchanged. He was still hungry, and the forest still surrounded him. However, he did not give up. He trusted in God and his own luck, hoping for the day he would escape the forest, fervently praying. The 4th day of the long journey through the forest brought even harder tests for the tailor. His stomach was empty, and his energy was depleted, but the shoemaker beside him maintained a stable condition as he ate his lunch. When the tailor begged the shoemaker for a piece of bread, his response was cold. The shoemaker scoffed at him and coldly said, "You were always so joyful, now see what it's like to be sad. Birds that sing too early in the morning get caught by the hawk in the evening." These words deeply hurt the tailor. The shoemaker's words made his situation even harder, and the tailor deeply contemplated the consequences of his choices. At this moment, the tailor felt disappointed by the shoemaker's merciless attitude and cold heart, and the solitude and hunger in the forest darkened his spirit even more. The morning of the 5th day dawned, but the tailor's situation was desperate. Several days of starvation and the harsh journey through the forest had exhausted him to the point of lying on the ground. His face had turned pale, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was so weakened that he could hardly move, and he could barely speak. In this dire moment, the shoemaker made a cruel offer. He proposed to give the tailor a piece of bread, but at a high cost. "Today I'll show mercy again and give you bread, but not for free. This time, I want your other eye." Hearing this, the tailor gathered his last bit of courage despite deep despair. He reflected on his reckless life and prayed to God for forgiveness. "Do as you wish, I will endure." His words were desperate but also carried a calm acceptance of his fate. In this extreme moment, the tailor chose to make another drastic sacrifice for survival. His decision showed how desperate his situation was, while also highlighting his strong will and challenge to human limits. Following the shoemaker's demand, the tailor suffered intense pain but managed to keep his life, albeit at a tragic cost. The tailor recalled the words his mother had told him in the midst of his dire situation. She had always advised, "Eat as much as you can, and endure what you must." These words gave the tailor great strength. After eating the costly bread from the shoemaker, he barely managed to stand up again. He tried to forget his misery for a moment, comforting himself with the thought that he could still see enough with one eye. However, the hardship continued. By the 6th day, intense hunger again tormented him, draining his strength nearly to death. The tailor collapsed beside a tree in the dark evening, and his condition worsened. By the morning of the 7th day, he was so weak that he could no longer stand up on his own. The tailor's situation became increasingly desperate. As death approached, the shoemaker once again made a cruel offer. He offered the tailor bread, demanding a high price. "Today I'll show mercy one more time and give you bread, but not for free. This time, I'll take your other eye." Hearing this, the tailor felt the depth of his reckless life and, while deeply despairing, mustered the last of his courage. "Do as you wish, I will endure." His words were desperate but also reflected a calm acceptance of his fate. This extreme moment highlighted the tailor's desperate situation and his unyielding spirit, challenging human limits. He made a tragic choice to maintain his life despite immense pain. After the tragic event, the tailor deepened his faith in divine justice, even in moments of deep sorrow and despair. He did not lose hope for his future and spoke to the shoemaker. However, our Lord does not always stand by idly, and the time will come when this wrongdoing done to me without cause will be repaid. When times were good, I shared what I had with you. My job is one where every stitch must always be the same. If I can no longer sew because I'm blind, I will have to beg. The tailor pleaded with the shoemaker not to leave him completely blind. "Anyway, if I go blind, don't leave me here alone. Otherwise, I will starve to death." His voice was desperate, but his request did not move the shoemaker's heart. Seemingly having expelled God from his heart, the shoemaker cruelly took his left eye as well. Then he finally handed the tailor a piece of bread. After this dreadful act, the shoemaker handed the tailor a walking stick and led him on their way. At this moment, the tailor was left completely blind, and his life became even more difficult. Leaving the darkness of the forest behind, they finally arrived at an open field where a gallows stood lonely under the ashen sky. The shoemaker led the now completely blind tailor to this place with the gallows. But then he coldly left the tailor there alone. Exhausted to his limit, the tailor was tormented by fatigue, pain, and extreme hunger. Now with nowhere else to go, he lay down on the small patch of ground under the gallows and closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the day's hardships. There, he slept through the night, finding some respite in his sleep. At dawn, the tailor tried to open his blood-stained eyes, but couldn't see where he was. He noticed the gallows in front of him, with two criminals hanging there. A crow sat on each of their heads. One of the hanged men spoke up. "Brother, are you awake?" His voice was weary but clear. The second person responded, "Yes, I am awake." Then the first man shared an important fact. "Then I will tell you something. The dew that falls on us has the power to make a blind man see. If blind people knew this, who knows how many could see again?" In his desperate situation, the words of the man hanging on the gallows gave the tailor a new ray of hope. He decided to act on the advice, carefully pressing his handkerchief into the grass to soak it with dew, and then gently washed his eyes with the moist handkerchief. At that moment, something miraculous happened. The haze before the tailor's eyes began to clear, and his vision gradually sharpened. As he removed the handkerchief, his eyes were completely transformed. Healthy, new eyes shone on his face. Astonished by this incredible change, the tailor opened his eyes wide. Miraculously regaining his sight, the tailor saw the world with entirely new eyes. He watched the sun rise over the mountains, and the light brought him unprecedented hope and emotion. His gaze extended to the grand gates of a large city with 100 towers. The golden balls and crosses on the spires shone, capturing his eyes. Now, the tailor could observe every detail of nature. He could distinguish each leaf on the trees, watch birds passing by, and observe small insects dancing in the air. All these fresh wonders approached him with a sense of awe, adding new colors to his life. When he took a needle from his pocket, the tailor realized he could sew again. Holding the needle, he began tailoring with skilled craftsmanship as before. At this moment, he was confident that his skills would continue to guide his life, and his heart was filled with joy. After regaining his sight, the tailor paused before continuing his new path to offer a deep prayer of thanks to God. He knelt down and expressed his gratitude for the second chance he had been given by divine grace. He also prayed for the souls of the criminals hanging on the gallows. Compassion for their suffering and isolation was embedded in his prayer. After praying, the tailor reorganized his thoughts, picked up his bundle again, and set out once more, leaving behind the pains he had endured. His steps were light, and his heart was full of hope. As he set off, he expressed his joy and gratitude by singing and whistling. This music lightened his heart and made his journey enjoyable. As the tailor continued his new journey, walking through the fields, he encountered a brown foal playing there. The foal caught his eye, and he tried to mount it to ride to the village. However, the foal pleaded in a startled voice. "I am still too young," said the foal. "Even a light tailor like you could break my back. Please let me go until I am stronger. Someday, I may be able to repay you." The tailor listened to the foal's plea and immediately let it go. He saw fear and innocence in the foal's eyes and decided to respect the wishes of the small creature. The tailor smiled at the foal and said, "All right, I'll let you run free. Let's meet again when you're strong enough to help me." As the tailor released the foal, it expressed pure joy. "All right, go on," said the tailor in a warm voice as he gently patted the foal's back. The foal responded to his kindness by excitedly raising its hind legs. Then, it gracefully jumped over fences and ditches, running across the field. The small tailor was walking home after a long and tiring day. The sun brightly illuminated his eyes, but his stomach was still empty. Pain from hunger was etched on his face, and his heart felt heavy. "The sun fills my eyes," he murmured, "but bread does not fill my mouth." His voice was weak and weary, and his mind was filled with anxiety. The small tailor stood by the road, watching passers-by, pondering how happy they looked, how they could look forward to their evening meal. But his pockets were empty, with nothing to eat. He kicked the ground weakly, bowed his head, and his thoughts circled only around food. A delicious piece of bread tantalized his vision, but it was just a figment of his hungry mind. Thus, he spent the night alone in the dark, battling hunger. Weakened by hunger, the tailor was walking through a meadow. What unfolded before his eyes was a vast, green meadow and a stork walking slowly across it. The stork's white feathers sparkled in the sunlight, shining brilliantly. "The first thing that comes my way will suffer because of my hunger." The tailor was losing his reason to hunger. He shouted at the stork, "Stop! Stop!" His voice was filled with desperation, and he quickly approached the stork, grabbing its long legs. "I don't know if you're edible, but hunger leaves me no choice. I have to cut your neck and cook you." The tailor's eyes blazed with hunger and desperation, while the stork looked at him in surprise. Fear lingered in the stork's large eyes, and its elegant gestures froze with tension. As the stork struggled to escape the tailor's grip, it spoke in a calm and firm voice. "Do not do this. I am a sacred bird that brings great benefits to people. Do not harm me." Its voice was composed, and its eyes seriously regarded the tailor. "If you spare my life, I will help you in another way." The tailor hesitated for a moment. His eyes met with the stork's, and he could read understanding and mercy in them. "Go then, long-legged cousin," he finally said, giving up and slowly releasing the stork's legs. As soon as the stork gained its freedom, it straightened its long, elegant legs, flapped its powerful wings, and soared into the sky. Its flight was smooth and graceful, and its feathers glistened in the sunlight, showcasing the beauty of freedom. It rose high in the air, looked back at the tailor once more, and then gradually disappeared. The tailor was walking through the meadow, fighting against hunger. His face was pale with the pain of starvation, and his heart grew increasingly heavy. "How will this end?" he murmured to himself as he walked. Suddenly, a small pond appeared in front of him. In the clear water of the pond, 2 ducklings were happily swimming. "Hunger grows, and my stomach empties. Whatever comes next is doomed to be eaten." His voice was despairing, and his eyes sparkled as he spotted the ducklings. Unaware, the ducklings approached him, their small bodies gently floating on the water. The serene scene by the reed-filled pond suddenly turned tense. Just as the tailor was about to wring the neck of one of the ducklings, driven by hunger, an old duck burst out from hiding, screaming loudly, "Please save my lovely children." Her voice was filled with desperation and anguish, and she pecked at the tailor's legs with her beak. Can you not imagine how sad your mother would be if someone were to take you away? Her words resonated with the tailor. For a moment, tears seemed to well up in his eyes. The tailor took a deep breath and paused in thought. "Quiet," he said gently and affectionately. "I will protect the children." His words were sincere. He carefully placed the duckling he was holding back into the water. The mother duck sighed with relief and looked at the tailor with warm eyes. The duckling jumped into the water and returned to its mother's embrace. Together, they floated safely in the pond, watching the tailor. Leaving the pond, the tailor walked into the quiet woods. Along the way, he stopped in front of a partially rotted tree. The tree looked old, and there were hardly any signs of life in its large, rough trunk, but there was bustling activity around it. Several wild bees were entering and exiting the tree, and their diligent movements piqued the tailor's curiosity. "I will receive a reward for good deeds here," the tailor said hopefully. "The honey will energize me." His voice carried a hint of anticipation. He approached the tree cautiously and examined the beehive. The hive was well hidden in a hole on one side of the tree, where the bees were busily collecting honey. As the tailor was carefully observing the beehive near the tree, attracted by the sweet scent of honey, suddenly the queen bee appeared before him. She was much larger and more majestic than the other bees, and her voice was stern and authoritative. "If you disturb our hive, our stings will prick your skin like 1,000 burning needles." The queen bee's words were threatening, yet her eyes held a deep meaning of warning and promise. "However, if you leave us alone and go, we will repay you later." The tailor was startled by the queen bee's words, but also deeply contemplative. He locked eyes with the queen bee for a moment, seriously taking in her grave warning. Inside, he struggled between the safety of the bees and the help they could offer. Eventually, the tailor decided not to harm the bees. He raised his hand to the queen bee, bowed his head in gratitude, and said, "I will heed your words. I will leave you unharmed and depart from this place." The queen bee nodded in approval at the tailor's decision and returned to the hive. The tailor walked away from the tree without looking back. The little tailor left the forest and returned to the village. His steps were heavy, and his heart was filled with disappointment. Clutching his hungry stomach, he entered his small cabin. The cabin was dark and lonely, and he headed to the kitchen in search of hope. 3 empty bowls, and a 4th holds nothing either. What a poor dinner! The tailor muttered as he checked the kitchen shelves. The bowls were as empty as his hollow heart. He sighed with frustration, dismayed by the fact that there was nothing to prepare for dinner. Despite his deep disappointment and hunger, the tailor walked back into the center of the village. As the village's small clock tower chimed noon, his steps unconsciously followed the sound. The village square was bustling with people, and the air was filled with the delicious aroma of food. As he entered the square, the villagers welcomed him. "Mr. Tailor, welcome. It's lunchtime." Kind neighbors invited him to a seat, smiling. In front of him was a long table laden with various foods, all already prepared and waiting for him. The tailor momentarily forgot his fatigue and hunger and immediately sat down. In front of him were warm bread, fresh vegetables, homemade stew, and more. He ate his first bite with a heart full of gratitude, and the taste seemed to awaken all his senses. After a hearty meal, the tailor regained his energy. He stood up under the dazzling sunlight with a resolute voice. "It's time to start working." New hopes and goals began to sprout in his heart. He roamed around the village looking for a suitable workshop. His efforts soon bore fruit, and he secured a position in a small tailoring shop on the busiest street in the village. The shop owner highly valued the tailor's skills and passion, offering him the opportunity to further develop his craft. The tailor diligently learned his trade, and each day his skills shone brighter. The clothes he created started to become well known among the villagers, and his delicate work and original designs drew everyone's attention. Before long, he became the most famous tailor in the village, and people from other villages came to buy his clothes. The tailor's reputation extended beyond the village and reached the royal court. His exceptional talent and fine workmanship were recognized by all, and his importance continued to grow. The tailor felt proud of his achievements, but always sought new challenges, looking to higher aspirations. "There's no further I can go with my skills," the tailor murmured to himself in his workshop. But the situation is improving. Each piece of clothing he created was like a work of art, and his reputation demanded a bigger stage. The king heard of his fame and was impressed. Eventually, the king appointed the tailor as the royal tailor. This news reached the tailor, who felt deeply grateful and was invited to the royal court. On the day the tailor was appointed as the royal tailor, strangely, his old colleague, the shoemaker, was also appointed as the court shoemaker. Their fates crossed once again. However, the shoemaker's heart was not at peace. Seeing the tailor's dazzling success in the royal court, he felt guilty about past events. The tailor barely remembered their past, but the shoemaker felt it as a great burden. Before he can take revenge, the shoemaker thought to himself, "I must trap him." His eyes showed anxiety and calculation, and he began to plan a conspiracy to entrap the tailor. The shoemaker quietly started contacting other figures within the royal court. He sought people who would agree with his plan and spread rumors about the tailor. His words gradually spread as whispers within the royal court, slowly sowing distrust and suspicion against the tailor. The shoemaker's conspiracy deepened. After work, as darkness fell, he quietly approached the king. Walking along the quiet corridors of the royal palace, he reassured himself that his plan would succeed. Arriving at the king's side, he spoke in a fawning voice. "Your Majesty, the tailor is an arrogant man, boasting that he could bring back the long-lost golden crown." His words spread like poison in the king's ear, and the king's expression gradually darkened. The king knew well the story of the lost crown, a symbol and precious relic of the state, and the tale of the tailor's arrogance disturbed him. Despite feeling disturbed by the shoemaker's story, the king decided to officially present the challenge to the tailor. "If that is true, I would be very pleased," the king said. His voice mixed with expectation and doubt as he ordered the tailor to be called to the palace the next morning. When the tailor stood before the king made a significant demand. "Retrieve the golden crown or leave the city forever." This command was an unexpected trial for the tailor, and the golden crown was a long-lost important relic of the state. The tailor insisted that he had never made such a statement, but the king presented this challenge as a way to test his capabilities. The tailor seriously pondered the king's impossible demand. "Oh dear," he murmured pessimistically. "A villain gives more than he owns. If the king asks me to do something no one can do, I will not wait until morning, I will leave immediately." His resolve was firm, and he was confident in his choice. He packed his precious tools and a few personal items into a bundle. With each item he packed, he remembered the good times in the city, the people he had met, and the achievements he had made. His heart was filled with regret and sadness, but he was ready to follow his own path. He quietly left the royal court. Walking through the city streets, he reminisced about the past and hid his tears. The tailor's steps were heavy, but deep inside, there was a hope for a new beginning. He didn't know what difficulties lay ahead, but he was ready to find his way. Continuing his journey away from the city, the tailor arrived at a familiar place, the pond where he had met the ducks. The pond was still as peaceful as in his memory. As he approached the pond's edge, at that moment, the mother duck he had saved was quietly preening her feathers by the water. The mother duck recognized the tailor as soon as she saw him and immediately approached him. She asked why he looked so sadly bowed. His face was shadowed not by past happiness, but by sadness and troubles. The tailor had a deep conversation with the mother duck. His face bore the marks of the hardships and stress he had endured recently. "You wouldn't be surprised by what has happened to me," he spoke quietly. He explained the king's demand and the challenge he faced, and how desperate his situation was. After listening to his story, the mother duck conveyed a message of hope. "If that's all," the duck said, "we can help. The crown is fallen in the water, at the bottom, we'll bring it up shortly. Just spread your handkerchief by the water's edge." The mother duck and her 12 ducklings diving into the pond was a sight to behold. Their movements were harmonious and efficient, and it didn't take long before they were back on the water surface. The crown had been submerged for a long time, but finding it was made possible by the duck's remarkable abilities. The mother duck carefully placed the crown on her wings. Her ducklings cooperated like a well-practiced team, supporting the crown with their beaks as they moved it carefully to the shore. They placed the crown precisely on the handkerchief, and the tailor watched with tears of emotion. Despite some tarnish from its time in the water, the crown still retained its regal beauty and dignity. This crown was a symbol of the kingdom's history and tradition, and retrieving it was a great fortune for the tailor. When the tailor, carrying the handkerchief-wrapped crown, arrived at the royal palace, the villagers cheered at the sight of the treasure he bore. No one could imagine how magnificent the crown was. As the sun shone on it, it sparkled like tens of thousands of rubies, its light illuminating everywhere, reflecting the pride on the tailor's face. Upon reaching the palace, the tailor tied the four corners of the handkerchief and carefully presented the crown to the king. The entire royal court held its breath as they watched this scene. The king took the crown, and seeing its restored beauty and authority, he was deeply moved. The king, filled with joy, hung a golden chain around the tailor's neck. This chain symbolized his loyalty, courage, and devotion to the royal court. "Your courage and wisdom have returned our kingdom's precious heritage," the king proclaimed. "This golden chain commemorates your loyalty and bravery." After his first conspiracy failed, the shoemaker became even more enraged and desperate. However, he did not give up and devised another scheme. He planned to further damage the tailor's reputation and oust him from the royal court. The shoemaker approached the king again with a lie. "Your Majesty, the tailor is being arrogant again. He boasts that he can replicate the entire royal palace in wax," he claimed. His words were enough to sow doubt and unease, as the statement about replicating the palace could be seen as a challenge to the king and royal authority. The king listened to the shoemaker's words once more. He recognized that if the tailor was indeed behaving in a way that undermined the royal authority by using his position, it could be a serious issue. Therefore, the king decided to summon the tailor and demand his explanation. Despite his suspicions, the king decided to test the tailor's abilities by issuing a challenge. He ordered the tailor to create a perfect wax replica of the entire royal palace. The order was stern, and he warned that if the finished model was even slightly inaccurate, or if a single nail was missing from a wall, the tailor would be imprisoned for life. The tailor was shocked upon hearing this command. Replicating the entire royal palace in wax seemed nearly impossible. Feeling the increasing pressure and stress unbearable, the tailor decided to leave the palace far behind. He packed a simple bundle and set out, his steps heavy. When he arrived at the decaying tree he had visited before, he sat down exhausted and lowered his head. At that moment, the bees he had previously assisted appeared. The queen bee, seeing the tailor's sad demeanor, asked worriedly, "Why do you hang your head so low?" At first, the tailor claimed nothing was wrong, but soon he shared the burdens weighing on him. He explained the king's nearly impossible demand to create the wax model. The queen bee and the other bees buzzed amongst themselves upon hearing his story. They wanted to bolster the tailor's spirits, and the queen bee gave him words of hope. "Return home, but come back here tomorrow with a large cloth. All will be well." Trusting the queen bee's words, the tailor returned home. he gathered his spirits and awaited the next day, bringing the large cloth as instructed. Meanwhile, the bees had already flown to the palace and entered through an open window. They began meticulously inspecting every detail of the royal palace. The small bees managed to explore every nook and cranny, memorizing each room, hall, and decoration. Using their natural finesse and organization, the bees perfectly memorized the structure of the palace. They returned to the tailor with this information and began the task of creating a wax model of the palace. With the bees' remarkable memory and precise observation, they started crafting the wax model. The completed wax model of the royal palace was a masterpiece of intricacy and beauty. Its size and detail made it seem as if the actual palace was right before one's eyes. After tirelessly working day and night with the bees, every detail was perfectly recreated, with not a single nail or tile out of place. The next morning, when the tailor arrived at the palace with his creation, he proudly looked upon his work. He carefully wrapped the model in a large cloth and presented it to the king. The king was amazed by the beautiful wax model. Its perfect capture of the palace's grandeur and intricacy was so precise that the king found it hard to fully appreciate. The king was deeply impressed by the tailor's talent and the loyalty demonstrated through this task. As a reward for his skill and perseverance, the king gifted the tailor a large stone house near the royal court. This house would provide a comfortable and stable space for the tailor to spend the rest of his life as the official royal tailor. Despite the tailor's continuous success in the royal court, the shoemaker felt frustrated and plotted another plan to bring him down. He went to the king with a new fabricated story. "Your Majesty, the tailor has been heard saying that the water in the castle's courtyard will not only rise, but it will shoot up as high as a man and be as clear as crystal," the shoemaker claimed. The king was surprised by these words and decided to summon the tailor once again to verify this claim. The king asked the tailor directly about this assertion, and the tailor repeatedly denied having made such a statement. However, this time, the king approached the shoemaker's words with a bit more caution. He decided to test the tailor's ability to make the water rise in the courtyard. Following the king's order, the tailor was faced with a situation where his life would be at risk if water did not spring up in the castle's courtyard by the next day. "If water does not arise by tomorrow, the executioner will have your head," the king sternly warned, putting immense pressure on the tailor. Upon hearing the king's command, the tailor immediately ran out of the castle gates. It was a serious matter this time, as his life hung in the balance, and tears of anxiety and fear streamed from his eyes. He felt the gravity of his situation and desperately sought a way to escape this crisis. When the tailor's heavy steps led him toward the pond, filled with sorrow and despair, something extraordinary happened. The colt he had once helped, now grown into a beautiful chestnut horse, appeared before him. The horse recognized the tailor and approached him, saying, "It's time for me to repay the good you've done." The horse knew of the tailor's predicament and was ready to offer the needed assistance. "I already know what you need. Help is on the way. Get on my back. I can carry us both easily." Touched by the horse's words, the tailor's despair slowly turned to courage. Without hesitation, the tailor approached the horse and leapt onto its back. Together, like longtime companions, they started to gallop. The horse quickly took the tailor back to the castle, heading straight for the courtyard. As they approached, the horse explained more about the help that was coming. Like the tailor had once aided the horse, it was now the horse's turn to assist the tailor. The tailor and his mystical horse charged into the castle courtyard. Upon arrival, the horse galloped around the courtyard 3 times, emitting powerful energy. On the 3rd round, the horse leapt powerfully, and at that moment, thunder roared in the sky. Simultaneously, chunks of earth shot up high into the air from the center of the courtyard. Amazingly, as these earth pieces were suspended in the air, a clear, transparent stream of water shot up as high as a man from the middle of the courtyard. The water stream was so clear that the sunlight sparkling on it created a rainbow-like effect. The scene appeared magical, captivating everyone in the castle. The king, witnessing this miraculous event, stood up in astonishment. He was deeply moved by the tailor's bravery and resolve, and by the astonishing outcome. Without hesitation, the king embraced the tailor in front of everyone, celebrating his public deeds. At this moment, the tailor's honor was fully restored, and he was celebrated not as a suspect, but as a hero. Although the tailor's success and reputation seemed secure, the shoemaker continued to test and conspire against him. This time, the shoemaker approached the king with another ludicrous story. "Your Majesty, now the tailor boasts that he can bring a son to you from the sky." The king was aware that the tailor had been falsely involved in several claims before, but the lack of a son in the royal family was a significant concern for him. Despite the absurdity of this claim, the king, wrapped in curiosity and desperate hope, decided to hear the tailor's words once again. When the tailor entered the royal court, he was dismayed to find his name involved in yet another bizarre claim. The king offered the tailor an astonishing proposition. "If you bring a son within 9 days, I will have him marry my eldest daughter." This offer promised the tailor a great reward, but also set before him an almost impossible task. "The reward is truly great," the tailor whispered to himself. Yet, he seriously contemplated the feasibility of this challenge. "I'm willing to try anything, but that cherry is too high. If I try to pluck it, the branch will break, and I will fall. These words expressed the tailor's fear and simultaneously highlighted the perilous nature of this task. Faced with the king's impossible demand, the tailor felt extreme stress and pressure. The task of bringing his son from the sky imposed a tremendous burden on him. Returning home, he sat at his workbench and deeply pondered all possible options, but eventually, none seemed feasible. "It won't work," he eventually exclaimed. "I must leave. I can never live in peace here." His decision was spontaneous, but he felt it was necessary. Deep inside, he determined that life here was no longer suitable for him. He wanted to venture into the wider world in search of new opportunities. He packed his bundle and quickly left his home, leaving behind all memories and experiences. As the tailor walked towards his new destination, he arrived at a vast plain where he encountered the stork he had met before. The stork was walking back and forth in a philosopher-like serious manner, occasionally stopping to carefully observe and catch a frog. His movements were intentional and purposeful. When the stork noticed the tailor, he approached his friend and warmly greeted him. "Seeing you packing up and leaving," the stork said. "Why are you leaving the town?" His voice mixed curiosity with concern. The tailor explained to the stork the recent hardships and the king's nearly impossible demand he had faced. He told how he had tried to meet the king's demands, but eventually decided to leave the town. "In the end, I can't live in peace here," the tailor told the stork. "I think I need to start anew somewhere else." The tailor told the stork about the difficulties he was facing, including the king's almost impossible demand to bring a son from the sky. His voice carried a tone of despair and fatigue. Moved by the tailor's misfortune, the stork sincerely sought to comfort him. "Don't go gray over this," the stork advised. "I'll solve your problem." The stork's words gave the tailor new hope. The stork then began to explain his plan. The stork revealed that he possessed ancient wisdom and magical powers. He had the ability to connect the sky and the earth and could bring about miraculous events only heard of in myths. The tailor was moved by the stork's offer. He believed in the stork's abilities and felt hopeful that his problem would be resolved. The stork confidently explained his plan to the tailor, showing his ability to safely bring many children to the village in the past. This time, he was sure he could magically bring a small prince from the well. "Go home and be at ease. From now, wait for 9 days and then come to the palace, where you should wait," the stork instructed. The tailor felt relieved by the stork's words. His heavy burden seemed to lift, and for the first time in a long while, he felt peace. He followed the stork's instructions and returned home, preparing for the 9-day wait filled with hope that he would soon meet the king's demand. On the appointed day, the tailor arrived at the palace, expecting the stork to fulfill his promise as they waited in the palace courtyard. The king and the royal court also gathered to witness this special moment. "9 days later, a tapping sound on the window drew the tailor's attention. He opened it to see a stork stepping carefully with long, elegant legs across the smooth marble floor. The stork was carrying a beautifully angelic baby in its beak, a scene so dreamlike it was almost unbelievable. The baby reached out a tiny hand to the queen as the stork gently placed it on her lap. The queen caressed the baby and gave it a loving kiss, filling the room with joy. The arrival of the baby was a blessing for the royal family, and the queen imagined the happiness and prosperity it would bring to the kingdom. As a final gift, the stork handed the queen the tailor's travel bag. Inside were small paper bags filled with colorful sweets, which were distributed among the little princesses of the court. The princesses expressed their delight at these unexpected treats, infusing the palace with joy. However, the king's eldest daughter did not receive these small sweets. Instead, she chose another gift: marriage to the tailor. This decision surprised everyone, but the eldest daughter was confident in her choice. Through marriage, the tailor became a member of the royal family, and his new life began to unfold. Reflecting on all his experiences, the tailor said, "I feel like I've received the highest award, happy and content. My mother was right, always trust in God, and with good luck, there's no failing." His words conveyed his gratitude and joy for overcoming past adversities and finally finding fortune. The shoemaker was tasked with making shoes for the tailor's wedding as his final job. However, his fate had already been sealed. After the wedding, he was ordered to leave the village forever, and his footsteps were heavy. On his way to the forest, he was led to a gallows. There, his fate met a terrible end. Exhausted from anger, fury, and heat, the shoemaker eventually collapsed. As he tried to close his eyes and rest, 2 crows that had been flying over the heads of those hanged at the gallows swooped down and pecked out his eyes mercilessly. The crow's brutal act only added to his miserable end. He ran madly into the forest, suffering from hunger until he eventually died. After his death, no one saw him or heard from him again. you.